November 24th, 1326, Hereford Marketplace. The air is thick, iron, rot, and something sweeter. Anticipation. They've come from miles, peasants smelling of soil and sour ale, clergy clutching crosses like shields, nobles draped in velvet, faces masks of cold satisfaction, all straining, pushing, a sea of eyes fixed on the wooden platform rising like an altar in the mud. He's dragged, not walking, pulled by ropes biting into raw wrists, pale as grave wax, starved hollow, broken, but the shape of arrogance still clings to his bones. Once he ruled this kingdom, not from the throne, but through the man who sat upon it. His whisper was law, his greed policy, his enemies vanished. Hugh Despenser. Today they will unmake him, not just kill, unmake, castration, disembowelment, hanging. A crown of thorns presses bloody rivulets down his temples, Bible verses, psalms of vengeance, carved crudely into his exposed flesh. This is no execution. It is a message written in screams, carved in flesh, burned onto the soul of England. This is how power ends. In the early 1300s, England bled, not from open war but from a poison seeping through its heart, the court of King Edward II, a king whose affections ignited civil strife, whose favor was a death sentence. First came Piers Gaveston, radiant, arrogant, the king's other self. The baron's jealousy curdled into hatred. They ambushed him, murdered him on Blacklow Hill, left his body desecrated. The king wept, the kingdom sighed, relief, or merely paused. Into that vacuum of grief and power he slithered, Hugh Despenser the Younger, not born to charm like Gaveston, but to possess, ambitious as a coiled viper, calculating as a spider spinning its web. He saw the king's broken heart and saw an opening. Through marriage, a cold transaction binding him to Edward's niece, Eleanor de Clare, Hugh secured his foothold at court's edge. Then the chamberlain's key, access to the king's private hours, his doubts, his desires. Hugh became the shadow clinging to the throne, the whisper in the royal ear, the hand guiding the seal. What followed was a reign not of Edward but of Despenser, a reign built on naked greed, brutal humiliation and chilling revenge. It warped justice, it beggared nobles, it fractured a kingdom already trembling, and its end would stain the cobblestones of Hereford with a horror England had never witnessed. This is the story of the favorite who consumed a king and was devoured by the monsters he made. The year is 1286. Hugh Despenser the Younger draws his first breath, not into innocence but into a web of power. His cradle is woven from noble blood and cold ambition. The Despensers, lords of Glamorgan, marcher barons, their hands know the weight of swords and the slickness of political grease. Young Hugh learns early. Land is blood, titles are armor, and proximity to the throne is the only air worth breathing. He marries Eleanor de Clare, a transaction sealed with royal blood. She is Edward II's niece. A key turns in the lock of the king's inner circle. Hugh slips through the door. His eyes miss nothing. The king's melancholy after Gaveston's murder, the hollow spaces in Edward's trust. Hugh offers himself, not as a dazzling favorite, but as a pillar, dependable, calculating, a spider sensing the tremors in the royal web. Appointment, royal chamberlain. Now Hugh controls access. The king's bedchamber, his private hours, his unguarded whispers. Hugh filters them all. He becomes the gatekeeper. Petitioners bow to him first. Royal seals bear the pressure of his finger beside the king's. Lands flow into Hugh's coffers like poisoned rivers. He seizes the Gower Peninsula, igniting baronial fury. He strong-arms widows, like Lady Margaret Battlesmere, stripped of her dower lands, while grief still stains her cheeks. He twists the law like wet parchment, finding treason in any voice that dares question his assent. For 4 years, England kneels not to Edward but to Hugh. The king's signature is a formality. Hugh's will is law. Rumors coil through the damp stone corridors of Westminster like serpents, whispers of the king's unnatural intimacy with his chamberlain. Shared beds, secrets traded in the dark. Hugh doesn't deny, he leverages it. Fear becomes his currency. The Despenser shadow stretches long, choking the light from the realm. Gold piles high in their castles. Estates sprawl across the map, but the air grows thick with the stench of resentment, a slow rot beneath the gilded surface. Power, absolute and unchecked, festers. Hugh walks the palace halls, hearing only the echo of his own steps. He forgets to listen for the knives being sharpened in the dark. He wasn't just the king's favorite, he was the king's shadow, and that shadow grew long and monstrous. Power, unchecked, breeds its own poison. Hugh Despenser sits at the king's right hand, gorged on stolen lands and royal favor. But the feast turns sour. The air in Westminster thickens with the stench of hatred. His enemies are no longer distant barons muttering in their castles. They are inside the walls. They wear crowns and titles. They breathe the same corrupted air. Queen Isabella, the she-wolf of France, endures the deepest cut. Stripped of her lands, her very dower, the lifeblood of a queen's independence, handed to Hugh's hungry allies. Her household, her loyal French ladies, ripped from her side by Despenser's order, accused of treachery for merely breathing. But the ultimate violation, her children, Prince Edward and his sisters, removed, placed under the control of Hugh's cronies. Guards loyal to the favorite watch her every move. She is a prisoner in gilded halls, her womb's fruit held hostage by the spider in the king's shadow. Her humiliation is not just personal, it is a desecration of the monarchy itself. Beyond the queen's silent fury, the nobility stirs like a wounded beast. Parliament's ancient voices are drowned out by Hugh's sneering decrees. Taxes bleed the land dry, flowing not to the realm's coffers, but directly into Despenser's vaults. Estates are seized on flimsy pretexts, a whispered doubt, a refusal to bow low enough. Justice is a puppet dancing on Hugh's strings. The marcher lords, powerful border barons, see their ancestral rights trampled. Their rage simmers, a volcano building pressure beneath England's green fields. Hugh feels the tremors. His response, not conciliation, but the boot heel. He imprisons opponents in damp, lightless oubliettes, forgotten men rotting while he dines. He exiles critics, their lands swiftly divided among his grasping kin. When forced into a brief exile himself by baronial fury, he doesn't hide, he turns pirate. His ships, flying no flag but greed, descend on English merchant vessels in the Channel. Cargoes are plundered, sailors murdered, the spoils hauled back to bolster his defiance. It is the act of a warlord, not a king's minister. The realm gasps, the line is crossed. Isabella sees her moment. Under guise of a diplomatic mission, she escapes the gilded cage. She flees to France, to her brother's court, and there she finds not just sanctuary but a weapon. Roger Mortimer, a powerful marcher lord who escaped Hugh's dungeon, his hatred honed to a razor's edge. Mortimer, ambitious, ruthless, sees the path back to power, through the queen's righteous wrath. An army is gathered, not a foreign invasion, but a liberation they claim. Isabella, the scorned queen, becomes the figurehead of rebellion. Her son's inheritance, she declares, is stolen by the favorite. September 1326, they land on the Suffolk coast. The response is not steel but surrender. Hugh's reign of fear has hollowed out loyalty. Towns open their gates. Nobles, their resentment boiling over, flock to Isabella's banner. The tyrant Despenser is the glue that binds the rebels. Edward II, weak and bewildered, clings to Hugh as Wales. Despenser's power base becomes their only refuge. They flee London like thieves in the night, the crown's authority crumbling behind them. The hunt is on. The shadow is running from the light it once consumed. Power makes enemies, but stolen power makes monsters, and monsters are hunted. Wales, the last refuge. Hugh Despenser and King Edward II cower amidst the dripping cliffs and sodden valleys. But Mortimer's hounds are relentless. Their pursuers know these marches, every hidden path, every treacherous bog. Hope curdles into dread. They attempt escape by sea, a desperate storm-tossed flight towards Lundy Island. Fate laughs. A contrary wind drives them back, straight into the waiting nets of Henry of Lancaster. The king is taken with a semblance of dignity. Hugh, dragged from the reeking bilge like a cornered rat. His power is ash. His body is next. He knows what awaits. The chroniclers will later claim he seeks a cleaner end. In his cold cell at Monmouth Castle, Hugh Despenser refuses food. He wills his body to die. Starvation is his final act of control. Days blur, flesh melts from bone, strength ebbs, but his enemies deny him even this mercy. They need him alive, alive for the spectacle. Guards pin him down. A leather funnel is forced between his teeth. Thin gruel like rancid mortar is poured down his ravaged throat. He gags, he chokes, he lives. His body is preserved for the butcher's block. The humiliation is absolute. November 24th, 1326. Hereford. The tribunal gathers not in a hall of justice, but a stage for vengeance. Isabella sits enthroned, eyes glacial. Mortimer stands beside her, a predator savoring the kill. The barons who escaped Hugh's dungeons or lost their lands form a grim chorus. The charges are bellowed into the thick air. High treason, robbing the crown. Accusations twist into grotesque shapes. sodomy with the king, a crime against God and nature, sorcery, corrupting the king's mind, usurping royal power, the core truth wrapped in lurid lies. Hugh is permitted no defense, no witnesses but his accusers. His guilt is etched in the cold satisfaction on Isabella's face, the cruel set of Mortimer's jaw. This is not a trial, it is a ritual of condemnation. The sentence is pronounced, not mere death, annihilation, a performance meticulously crafted to scourge his soul and terrify the realm. First, degradation. He will be stripped naked, dragged through the filthy streets by horses, the common rabble invited to spit and curse. Then, the sacred made profane. Bible verses, Psalms 52 and 54, crying out against the wicked and deceitful, will be painted onto his exposed skin. A crown, not of gold but of sharp, stinging nettles, will be pressed upon his head, mocking his stolen authority. Finally, the main spectacle. He will be bound to a tall ladder before the roaring crowd, castrated like a beast, disemboweled while consciousness clings, only then hanged, beheaded, quartered, his remains scattered like offal. Hugh hears the sentence. Does he flinch? Does a final flicker of that old arrogance remain? Or is there only the hollow terror of a man who knows his body is about to become a canvas for his enemy's hatred and the kingdom's catharsis? The sentence isn't read, it's performed. The crowd outside the makeshift court already chants the psalms they know will soon adorn his flesh. The air vibrates with a bloodlust, thinly veiled as pious fervor. This was not law, it was theater, and Hugh would be the performance. Hugh Despenser is stripped, not with dignity, but with tearing hands. His skin, pale from prison and starvation, is a canvas for holy rage. Thick black pigment, tar mixed with ash, is daubed onto his flesh. Psalm 52, why boastest thou thyself in mischief, O mighty man? Psalm 54, save me, O God, by thy name. The words crawl across his ribs, his thighs, a blasphemous scripture written by his executioners. A crown is woven, not of thorns but of fresh, stinging nettles. It bites into his scalp, drawing thin rivulets of blood that mingle with the grime on his face. Mockery is the first ritual, humiliation the first cut. He is bound fast to the tall ladder. Ropes bite into wrists already raw. The ladder leans back. He stares not at the executioners, but at the leaden sky. Does he pray, or does the void stare back? The crowd falls unnervingly silent, a collective intake of breath. The first blade flashes, not steel for a knight, but a butcher's knife. It finds its mark between his legs, a swift, brutal excision. Hugh's body convulses against the ropes. A sound rips from his throat, not a scream yet, but a guttural expulsion of pure, animal shock. The executioner holds the bloody prize aloft. For his lust and sodomy, the crowd roars approval. The flesh is tossed into a brazier nearby. Flames leap, greedily consuming. The smell is immediate, acrid, nauseatingly sweet. Burning hair, burning meat. Hugh watches, his eyes wide, uncomprehending horror etching lines deeper than any blade. This intimate annihilation is the second ritual. Before the agony can fully claim him, the knife returns, longer, sharper. It presses just below the ribs, a slow, deliberate slice inwards, then upwards. Hugh's scream finally erupts. It shreds the air, a sound beyond human endurance, a raw scrape against the soul. It echoes off the market walls, silencing even the ravens. The executioner plunges his hand into the opening. He roots, he pulls. Hugh's entrails slither out, glistening ropes of pink and gray in the cold light. Steam rises from them. The crowd gasps, a wave of revulsion and fascination. The executioner coils them, deliberate, almost tender. He holds them high, for his greed and corruption of the realm. He casts them into the brazier beside the smoldering remnants. The flames roar anew, fed by fat and tissue. Hugh is still alive. His chest heaves, his eyes roll. He sees his own insides curling black in the fire. The disembowelment is the third ritual, the sacrifice offered to the mob's hunger for justice. Only then, when the ultimate desecration is complete, when his body is an open ruin and his soul surely shattered, is he granted the mercy of death. The ladder is jerked upright. A coarse rope is looped around his neck. He is hanged. His broken body jerks, a final futile spasm. Life clings stubbornly, then flees. They leave him hanging long enough for the crowd to see the stillness, to believe the horror is over. It is not. The body is cut down. An axe swings. The head separates with a sickening thud, held aloft by the hair. The torso is rolled onto the block, quartered. The axe bites deep into spine, through meat and bone. Limbs are hacked free. The cobbles run slick and dark. The fourth ritual is fragmentation. The kingdom is cleansed by dismemberment. His head is mounted on a spike above London Bridge. The four quarters, arms and legs, are salted, packed and dispatched to the four corners of England: Newcastle, York, Bristol, Dover. Warnings nailed to city gates. The ultimate humiliation: the man who sought to devour the kingdom is now meat scattered to its dogs. The crowd disperses, chattering, strangely light. Vendors sell ale. Children mimic the screams. The brazier cools, leaving only greasy ash and the stench of burned offerings clinging to the damp air. Justice is served. Brutality is sanctified. Order, drenched in blood, is restored. His death was not just justice, it was a ritual to cleanse a kingdom, in blood, in fire, and in fear. 4 years, that's all it took. 4 years of absolute dominion. Hugh Despenser the Younger, Lord of Glamorgan, Chamberlain of England, the shadow gripping the king's hand. He amassed lands like a dragon hoarding gold. He bent barons to breaking. He held a queen captive and a kingdom hostage. His name echoed with fear. Then it ended, not with a sigh but with a scream that tore the sky over Hereford. His corpse became geography. A head on London Bridge, an arm in Newcastle, a leg in Bristol, salted meat for the ravens, a warning nailed to cathedral doors. This is the fate of ambition that devours its own. Isabella and Mortimer ruled. Edward II died mysteriously months later. A red-hot poker whispered in dark corridors. The rebellion justified itself with Hugh's butchered flesh. See, the rot is cut out. The kingdom is clean. But the stain remained. His execution wasn't justice, it was a dark sacrament. They didn't just kill a traitor, they unmade a man to remake an order. The sheer theater of it, the verses on skin, the nettle crown, the burning entrails, exposed a deeper rot, the fragility of power itself. Hugh's sin wasn't loving a king, or even greed, it was the illusion of invincibility. He forgot power is fire. It warms, it illuminates, but hold it too close, too long, it consumes the hand that feeds it. History forgets his castles. It forgets the weight of his stolen gold. It remembers the ladder, the knife, the sound. He became the ultimate cautionary tale, a man who reached for the sun and found only the butcher's blade. The king's shadow dissolved, not into darkness, but into blood soaking the mud of a marketplace. Power devoured him, and England licked its lips. Hugh Despenser's screams faded over Hereford 7 centuries ago. But the hunger for power, the cruelty justified as cleansing, the way a crowd cheers as flesh burns, that hasn't changed. History's darkest corners are thick with stories like his, stories where the line between justice and butchery blurs and snaps. If this descent into medieval horror gripped you, if the sheer brutal poetry of a kingdom purging its sins in blood left you chilled, then you know the abyss we explore here. Subscribe, hit that bell, because next time we descend deeper.